You're listening to episode 19 of the Physical Education Podcast. Today you're going to learn about which types of exercise are best for chronic pain and why your personal choice of exercise might be harming your efforts without you realizing it. Hi, I'm Pierre Morand and you're about to learn about the hidden and often misunderstood causes of chronic pain. For 15 years I suffered with chronic pain with no cause or end in sight. I tried everything I could find but was often left with unanswered questions and conflicting advice. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and to become a physical therapist. I studied everything I could about pain, about the body, and about health. Along the way, I realized that the solutions to my pain and health issues were within me. I didn't need someone to fix me. I needed to reclaim ownership of my body and fix myself. More importantly, I needed to fix myself while honoring and understanding my body's own wisdom and capacity for self-healing. Since then, I've worked on bringing this knowledge to others in pain, combining pain science, psychology, biomechanics, nutrition, and neurology to provide the light bulb moments and self-awareness to take control. Because eventually most people in pain realize they need to understand the bigger picture of what causes chronic pain. The purpose of this podcast is to help you see and navigate that bigger picture so that you can finally reclaim control of your health and overcome pain once and for all. Hi folks, today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on exercise. So, exercise. The world of exercise, it's a bit of a minefield. There are tons and tons of options and recommendations and various schools of thought. But today I'm going to be focusing specifically on the area of chronic pain and how to exercise to reduce and to resolve chronic pain. So as I've covered in previous podcasts and in many social media posts, chronic pain is the result of chronic stress in the body. Now it could be any kind of stress, either mechanical, could be physiological, mental, emotional, chemical, and so on. So any kind of stress, it's not all just mental, it's not just anxiety, it's any kind of stress. And if the body is under too much stress, problems will occur. And chronic pain is one of those problems that may occur. Other problems could be high cholesterol, could be depression, could be all sorts of things. We're focusing obviously on chronic pain. So if we want to help our pain with exercise, with all of this in mind, then we need to take stress into consideration. And that's where I believe most methods fall short. It's the same with most recommendations we get, whether it's nutrition or exercise, they are focused on other things. They're not focused on pain, so they tend to fall short. So with this in mind, I want to share some key principles to find, first of all, the right kind of exercise for your needs and for your condition. So the first thing I would say is that you may need to challenge yourself on what it means to exercise. And there's a great quote by Dr. Andrea Spina, where he essentially says that, and I'm paraphrasing because I couldn't find the exact quote, but he says that exercise is a human invention to make up for the fact that we don't move much during the day. So the idea of exercise in the sense of going to the gym is recent enough. Now I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole on the origins of exercise, and it seems that various forms of exercise go back thousands of years. And yoga would be the most common example. But this idea of having a gym membership and doing exercise in this very clinical and procedural way appears to be a recent enough thing. Now it seems to have become a given that going to the gym for 1 hour, 4 days of the week, or even every day of the week, it's sort of come to be accepted as being necessary for attaining good health. And 15 years ago in Ireland, I don't know what it's like everywhere else, but it's probably not that different, but 15 years ago in Ireland there weren't gyms on every corner. Now everyone seems to have a gym membership or has had one in the past or feels like it's the right and healthy thing to do. It's almost taken as a given that you need to go to the gym if you want to be healthy. It's an assumption as common as you need to eat vegetables to be healthy. So what I would say is that unless you're preparing for a very specific, intense sporting event or demanding activity, I'm not convinced that the average person needs to ever set foot in a gym. And to understand this, we need to understand the distinction between health and fitness. This is really, really important, because health and fitness may seem like they go hand in hand, and in many ways they can be related, but it's very common to pursue and achieve fitness at the cost of your health. And the example I often use is that the world's healthiest, happiest and longest living people aren't the bodybuilders or the marathon runners or the Olympians or the Instagram models. I'd ask you, how many times have you heard of some ultra endurance athletes simply dropping dead, out of nowhere? And people will tend to be in disbelief when this happens, and they'll claim that the person was, quote, so healthy. But it's likely more accurate to say that they were fit. They had a high level of fitness, but they were not healthy, because healthy people do not drop dead out of nowhere with no obvious warning signs. And obviously there are two sides of this that we need to consider. There's always nuance. I'm not saying that fitness is bad. I'm simply saying that it is distinct from health. And I believe health is something we should all be striving for. Presumably we all want health. Or we should, well, I wouldn't say we should want it, but it's a very natural thing to want health. We want to live, we want to be alive, and we want to enjoy life. However, the level of fitness we pursue should be individual, and it should be based on our goals. And most importantly, I think we should know the risks that may come with challenging our fitness too much. And that's what I think we ignore, or we're not told. We're not told of the risks of becoming a jogger who jogs all the time to their heart's content. So high levels of fitness come at a cost, because the process of increasing your fitness is to expose yourself to stress. That's how we build fitness, and to build a tolerance to it. But stress is still stress, and the longer you've been exposed to the effects of stress, the more it will take its toll on your body. Now, I believe that much of our exercise culture glorifies the struggle and the challenges, no pain, no gain, pain is temporary, quitting is forever, all that Instagram bullshit. The culture encourages us to push through the pain and to callous our minds to discomfort. And this is where I believe there are particularly potent and unrecognized issues. And I've touched on this before, but it's the idea that your body tells you what it needs constantly. It's constantly telling you, but you need to be able to perceive that signal. So the example is the sensation of thirst. It helps you to self-regulate, but it's pointless if you can't perceive it and then act upon it. So callousing our minds dulls our ability to perceive our body's signals. But pain is a protective mechanism, and you can choose to ignore it, but you need to accept and understand the consequences. And as always, there's a dichotomy, like Jocko Willink loves to say. There's obviously value to being able to push through pain and to have the mental strength and discipline to push your limits. Even just the ability to reason through the sensation of pain and know when to dismiss it, because sometimes pain is just an overreaction from your brain. It's not particularly productive. But I would ask you, how necessary is it for you as an individual, for you to be able to endure extreme physical and mental punishment? Are you going to war, for example? Are you pursuing the pinnacle of human performance? Are you trying to push the limits of what the human body can do? And maybe you are. Great, good for you. But maybe you aren't. And most people simply want to be healthy. They want to live a good life without chronic pain or health issues. Most people work normal 9-to-5 jobs. So unless you're a professional athlete or a soldier going to war, or you do a job that requires you to push your physical limits, chances are you don't really need to be pushing yourself to any extreme degree. And I use that example of someone going to war because certainly a lot of whatever the algorithms are showing me on social media show a lot of fitness based modalities that are based off military service people who go to war and the kind of training they do. And that's obviously fair enough for those people, because they're trained to become human weapons. And you could go into a whole debate on how, disposable these people are as far as the powers that be are concerned. And so it's not really the pursuit of health, it's the pursuit of making someone as resilient as possible to stress, so that they can live long enough to kill more people. There's like I said, it's a whole other thing that we can get into, and it's not a judgment of it one way or the other, but it's the point that we're kind of that whole thing is glamorized and glorified, and the average person who has no interest in that is kind of sold on this. This is how you achieve fitness, this is how you achieve wellness and health, and we need to understand all these other things that are going on, and we need to kind of pick it apart. So this idea was really well explained in a course I attended a few years ago. This was hosted by Perry Nicholson, in case you're interested, and he was poking fun at this idea of quote beast mode. Again, it's part of this whole image that we're sold in the world of fitness and health. But he made the point that lions, the ultimate beast, the ultimate predator, tends to relax most of the day. Apparently they can sleep for up to 20 hours of the day, according to the internet, so it must be true. And then they briefly engage their beast mode to kill a gazelle. And the point being that in order to go into beast mode, you may need to be resting most of the time. But for most people, this is impossible, because we've got lives, we've got families, mortgages, long commutes to work, stressful and demanding jobs, got nutritional deficiencies, sleep issues, and all the other demands of modern life. And then on top of that, we're supposed to go to the gym and do our high intensity boot camp session for an hour, and just run ourselves into the ground. And when I put it that way, hopefully you see how crazy the whole thing is. Excuse me, but it's all packaged and sold to you in such a way that if you can't keep up with that standard, then you're a bad person. You're a lazy person, and enforcing yourself to follow that unrealistic standard, you may be dismissing and silencing your body's requests for change. And you're dismissing that tremendous wisdom your body has for knowing what it needs. And I mention this a lot, but it's worth repeating. In some cases, we'd never question the body's signals for a second. You don't question the sensation of thirst. You don't think of it as some sort of trick that your body's trying to poison you or make your life worse. But you might think of hunger as being a trick, because we've been told so many times to eat less, move more, eat less, move more. That's all it is. That's all it boils down to. It's all oversimplified. You've been told that so many times that you start to believe this arbitrary one-size-fits-all advice over your body's own self-regulating mechanisms. And again, this gets into a much, much bigger topic of how we can't really seem to think for ourselves. And I won't get into this further in this episode, because it deserves its own episode. But I believe that so many issues persist or are created in the first place because it's easier to follow things blindly and be told what to do than it is to think critically and to think for ourselves. But anyway, like I said, that is for another day. So now I've perhaps given you a good reason to ease off the intense exercise. Maybe you're thinking, thank God, I'm glad to be able to do less without feeling guilty. Though, I haven't really talked about specifics for now, but I will be sharing the more practical steps to how to approach exercise at the end of this episode. So don't worry, we will cover that. For now, I mostly want to paint a picture so you can understand where this advice is coming from and why it's different from the norm, why I'm sharing this perspective and why you may not have heard it before. Anyway, you might be thinking, so I've told you all this, you might be thinking, yeah, okay, I see your point. Maybe our culture of exercise is a bit too extreme and it's incompatible with the demands of most people's lives. But this is what you might be saying, but that's not me. I feel great. I'm quoting you. I'm hypothetically quoting you. I feel great when I exercise. I love it. It gives me such a boost and so on and all this. And people always say this. And what I would say is maybe that's true. Maybe you've dialed in your life so well that you can manage the demands of intense exercise without harming your health. It's entirely possible. But, as usual, I want to play devil's advocate, and I want to show you a side of this that you may not understand yet. So in many cases, people can be unaware of the stresses of their lifestyle because they're relying on stress hormones for energy, and they feel great because of this. They feel great because adrenaline can feel pretty good and cortisol can feel pretty good, and in the short term they can appear to have a beneficial effect on your body. Things like rapid weight loss, reduced inflammation, glowing skin, increased metabolism, increased energy, and increased and improved mood are common. These are common symptoms or common effects of an elevation of stress hormones. But these are only temporary. Excuse me, I have this cough. It won't go away because of stress. But anyway, these are only temporary benefits, and they aren't necessarily achieved by healthy or sustainable means. They're achieved temporarily by the elevation of stress hormones. And this appears to be why so many people get hooked on various forms of really intense exercise or restrictive diets, because what these things do is they create an increase in stress hormones, which will initially feel like a positive effect, but will eventually cause other issues. So the really common example is, I cut out everything that's enjoyable, I feel great. It's because you're running on adrenaline, and it's not healthy, and you might lose weight because your body's freaking out and it's cannibalizing itself for energy because you're not providing it energy. But you feel great because you may have a low level eating disorder and body image issues and all this kind of stuff. But the point is, I shouldn't laugh, but the point is, it's not a healthy way of feeling good. It's not really feeling good, it's feeling stressed, but spinning it as a positive. So, sorry, a bit of a tangent there. The question is, so I've sort of outlined what may be the case for you. The question is whether or not this is actually the case for you. So if you enjoy your lifestyle and intense exercise habits, but you're in pain with no end in sight, so I've described you do a lot of exercise and you're very healthy, quote, but you're in pain and nothing seems to be making it better, then this is a good indication that you are pushing yourself too much. And if that's the case, you may need to scale back your physical activity. You may need to scale back the levels of it or the intensity of it. That's something you're going to have to figure out. So that's one thing. If this sounds like you, if you're doing all of this stuff, if you're doing, quote, everything right, but you're in pain, then either you're pushing yourself too much and you need to scale things back, or you lack the energy or the healthy physiology to recover and cope with the demands. In which case, if that's the case for you, you may need to eat more, you may need to eat better foods, or you may need to reduce general sources of stress in your life. Usually it's a combination of these two, but it's going to boil down to those two mechanisms. So now that you have a better sense of where I'm coming from, why I'm presenting this different approach and why I'm presenting this different information, we can talk about solutions now, and I can share guiding principles for including exercise in your recovery. So the first thing is to do something physical, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem. And I think it's fair to say that regular daily movement is a necessity for good health. I think we can say that with complete confidence. So if you're doing nothing at all, I would highly encourage you to be doing something, even if it's just a short 5-minute walk. Even a breathing practice is a form of movement. So if you're bedridden, hopefully you're not, but if you are, start there. Start with a breathing practice. And to be honest, a breathing practice is something we should all be doing. So start with a couple of minutes per day and work your way up. But movement, simply get moving, because it's understandable when we're in pain we don't want to move because that can aggravate the pain. But it is so imperative to start to move again. And that was a major part of my own recovery, is just beginning to move again, trusting my body, and sort of doing the things that I'd done growing up that I was afraid to do now. And this brings me conveniently to my next key principle, and that is, this is going back to the breathing, and that is to only do as much as you can while breathing through your nose. So when you're doing any kind of exercise, only do as much as you can while breathing through your nose, because the moment the intensity or the complexity of your exercise causes you to inhale through your mouth, so the moment that it becomes too complex or intense that you have to breathe through your mouth, that's a clear sign that you're working beyond your capacity and you're stressing the body. As I said at the start, resolving pain is all about reducing stress. If you want to boil it down to one simple thing, it's stress reduction. And we reduce stress by making the body feel safe. Exercising to the point of needing to inhale through your mouth does not promote a sense of safety, because you're putting your body into what we call a fight or flight mode, a stressed mode. And you can think of it this way, because people think maybe this, what does breathing have to do with this? And your most vital function is breathing, and proper breathing is nasal breathing. So when you're forced to breathe through your mouth, then that's an indication that whatever you're doing is so demanding for you that you can't maintain your most vital function. So this is going to obviously be different if you're talking. If you're talking, you're more prone to breathing through your mouth, and that's fine. But when you're exercising and you're not having to talk, you should be breathing through your nose. So just to make that distinction. So you can use your breathing as a guide when it comes to exercise. When you get to a point when you're feeling compelled to inhale through your mouth, and you'll know that moment very, very well, you need to recognize this as an indication that you're reaching your body's limit of what it can do of what it can do without going into a state of stress. And this can be a really helpful guide to gauge your current state of stress, and I use this a lot when training jiu-jitsu, because we do pretty much the same warm-up at the start that involves some jogging, and it's generally the same every time, so I have a sense of how well I tend to cope with it. And if I've got a lot going on that day, if I'm feeling a bit run down, then I will be quicker to feel the need to inhale through my mouth. So you can try this for yourself with whatever habitual movement or exercises you do. So for example, a common example would be if you walk the same amount of stairs every day, maybe at home or in work or going places, simply notice your ability to breathe through your nose. See if this fluctuates, and see if you can scale the intensity of the effort so that you can maintain nasal breathing. So go for a walk and say, well, once I've done 30 steps, I'm really struggling. It might be a dull exercise, but you only do 30 steps and build your tolerance before, or take a break. If you're going to work and it takes 40 steps, take a break at the 30th step and recuperate, and then keep going. Just this is more so for awareness. This isn't really a sustainable way of exercising. And I suppose I should make the point, for the sake of clarity, that being out of breath when exercising isn't inherently bad, but it's an indication of a state of stress in the body. So it's necessary to do this when improving your fitness. Again, that distinction between fitness and health. But it can be detrimental if you're in pain and your aim is the overall reduction of stress. So when you want to improve your fitness, yes, you need to tax your lungs. You need to get to a point where you're out of breath, to challenge yourself, to stress the body so that it will grow from that challenge. But if we're trying to reduce stress and we're trying to make the body feel safe, then that's counterproductive. And another simple way to this is a different method of increasing safety. So proper breathing is going to increase safety in the body. Another way we can do this when exercising is to give yourself more support. It's that simple. And you can give yourself more support by sitting. So maybe you're doing a bicep curl for whatever crazy reason, but maybe it's harder to do that standing because you have to stabilize yourself more. You have to navigate gravity more. So in a seated position, just for a simple example, when you sit down, you have more support and you're alleviating stress. And you can also hold on to something, or by one of the big ones is working on the ground. And ground-based movements can be a great way of doing complexity is important, but safe movements that aren't too strenuous. And examples of these are things like rolling patterns, crawling, rocking back and forth, getting up and down from the ground. And these are essentially developmental movements that babies and toddlers have to work through during their development. And returning to these as an adult can be surprisingly challenging, but also very beneficial. And I'll include some resources and inspiration for this kind of movement exploration in the show notes. But yeah, ground-based movement, any way that you can increase support and still do the movement. So if you struggle to move your low back, if it's, picking things up, whatever it is, maybe try that in a seated position, maybe try that holding on to something, maybe try that while lying down, try the movements while lying down, and just make your body feel a bit more safe and earn the right to move on to the next step. So build confidence and pain-free movement at that lowest level, no matter how low it is, no judgment, whatever it is, that's what it is, and then earn the right to move up. So you wouldn't bench press 200 kilos to begin with. You would bench press just the bar, or you would do a push-up first, whatever it is, and you earn the right to make sure that earn the right, I think is the perfect way to say it. You earn the right to work up the ladder, and it's that simple. Yeah, it's that simple. The next thing I would encourage you to do is to give your exercise an external focus. So if you're in pain, it can be very easy to worry about what's going on inside your body and to be fixated on what the body is doing rather than the task you're performing. So if you're suffering with back pain, when you move, you might be thinking that things are grinding, things are pinching, things are impinging, whatever it is. So give yourself an external focus, and it's just to kind of give you an example, it's the distinction between bending down and touching your toes versus picking up that coin that fell out of your pocket. So in these two cases, the movements are roughly identical as far as your low back is concerned, but the intention and the focus are completely different. So another example would be a shoulder press. So perhaps you're in the gym and you're lifting a weight up over your head, and maybe that's sore, maybe you're having issues with that. So that would be one case, and the way we give it an external focus is perhaps putting your bag in the overhead compartment on a plane. So the exercise is the same, the movement is the same, but the way it's interpreted, the way your body approaches it is different. So giving your exercises a purpose or a context helps you to stop focusing on the parts of your body. It gets you out of this kind of microscopic view of what's going on in there, because you can become obsessed with what's going on in that painful body part. And it helps the brain to feel safe. Again, safety in the brain is key, because we're not obsessing over the problem. We're focused on a task. We're focused on something greater, on an external focus. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, another similar guideline to this is to make your exercise is to make your exercise playful. So games seem to promote a sense of safety. I don't understand the exact mechanism, to be honest, but they do seem to promote a sense of safety, and they create an external focus and a distraction from your pain, by default. So you can create a game that involves specific movements that are relevant to the pain or to a limitation. So again, maybe bending down, touching your toes tends to be sore. So maybe you can find a game where you have to pick up all the tennis balls and put them in a basket, and you have to bend down without squatting down, whatever it is, and you're incorporating that movement that you're maybe apprehensive of, but you're doing it in a safe manner. And the rule of thumb with any of this is always going to be only do it if you can do it pain-free. So I'm not saying fight through the pain just because you've given it an external focus. It's just that giving it an external focus can help to reduce the pain because it's shifting your focus. So yeah, you can create games that are specific to the movements that you need to reintegrate, or you can play a game while you maintain a position that tends to cause pain. And quite a convenient example of this recently was a person who had back pain in a very specific seated position. So it wasn't sitting all the time, but it was sitting in a specific couch, quite a deep couch. So my suggestion was to find games, or just any kind of game that can be played in that position. So you could play charades while you're sitting down. You could play that game Heads Up on your phone, which I think is essentially charades. You could juggle, you could have a conversation, you could do anything, play with your dog, whatever it is, but you're in that position, but you're not focused on that position. You're doing something else, and meanwhile you're enjoying yourself, you're challenging yourself in this really safe way, and your body is getting used to being in that position again. And it's essentially your brain is getting new information and saying, actually, this is safe. I've been in this position for a few minutes and there's nothing wrong. And so it's getting new information that things are safe, and it's safe to move again. So finally, I'd encourage you to think of exercise in the sense of giving your body, giving your bones, and giving your joints an opportunity to experience positions and movements that are unfamiliar. So if you spend most of your day in a flexed seated position, which is really, really common, I would encourage you to move and exercise in a way that allows you to experience the other end of the spectrum. So you could allow the hips to extend, allow the chest to open, and all that. And the simplest way to understand this is to think about what your joints do on a repeated basis, what your joints do all the time versus what they have the capacity to do. So a hip, for example, should be able to flex. Every human being, unless they've got some, obviously there are physical limitations for various reasons, but presuming that's not the case for you, every single human being, by virtue of having a skeleton, their hip should be able to flex, it should be able to extend, it should be able to rotate internally and externally, and it should be able to put all of those movements together. So there is a physiological range of motion that's possible for every human being, pretty much. So that's what's possible on the one hand, but then what does your hip do on a daily basis? Does it experience all of these ranges on a daily basis? And if it doesn't, you could simply start by giving it an opportunity to do so. Give it an opportunity to experience all of those ranges. And the analogy I've used before, and I find it really helpful, is like a scratch card. What you scratch away is your movement. So you have all of this potential that you can scratch away, but maybe you're only scratching away one small part, and that's what you're doing repeatedly. And what you want to do is you want to explore all of that square. You want to explore all of that range and scratch away every last bit of the scratch card. So hopefully that's more of a visual analogy, but hopefully it translates in the audio only format. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, as I begin to wrap up, I want to give you, let's give a recap of the guiding principles. So first thing, in many cases, less is more. I know we're generally sold this idea of always do more. In many cases, less is more. So I'm giving you permission to do less in a lot of cases, because exercise is demanding. Now, if you're suffering with chronic pain, you need to find ways to reduce stress. That should be your primary focus. And exercise may add more, and you need to recognize that. So you need to be sure that what you're doing isn't adding more stress than you can cope with. And this is going to be so individual. So you can determine this by asking yourself if you're able to breathe through your nose while you do the exercise. And then things like, do you hate the exercises you're doing? Do you hate going to the gym? Do you hate plodding along a treadmill? I mean, if you hate it, I probably can't see any good reason why you should do it. But again, I'm interested in health. I'm not interested in fitness. I'm not interested in getting you to do that marathon, even though it might not be a good idea. So this is just one man's opinion. But if you hate the exercises you're doing, maybe you should find a way to love them, or find different exercises that you enjoy. Do the exercises you do have a purpose? Are they enjoyable or playful? Can you make them playful? Do they help you attain goals that are meaningful to you? So is there a greater purpose? So again, going back to this idea of the treadmill, is the treadmill just a means to an end? Hopefully I'll lose some weight and I'll maybe feel better about myself, or is it because I have this lifelong dream of doing this marathon or whatever it is, and it's raining so I can't go outside, so I'm going to run on a treadmill? It's a very different context, even though it's the exact same exercise. So you need to recognize that. And you may want to start challenging the exercises that you're doing, and your perspective on exercise. Now, if you feel you're doing everything right, I would ask you, and I would encourage you, are you open to the idea that you may still be overdoing things? So you think you're doing everything right, but maybe you're overdoing things. Maybe that good feeling that you're feeling may just be the result of an excess of stress hormones. That this boost that you're feeling may only be temporary. And again, I'm not saying this is always going to be the case, but it's one that tends to fly under the radar, because I personally experienced this, and I really, really set myself back by overstressing my body through exercise and also diet. I was on crazy diets that were, quote, healthy, but they did me a lot of harm. So I felt great, and like I said, quote, I was doing everything right and I was extremely healthy. People kept telling me, you're really healthy, that's really impressive, and you're sort of encouraged. It's sort of presented as this virtue, and I was doing all these right things until I started developing other random symptoms and skin issues, sleep issues, stress. I think at the worst of it, I wouldn't say I was depressed, because I don't like to give myself that diagnosis, but I think if I'd gone to a doctor, he would have said I was depressed. So all of these things were just from overtaxing my body. So I was being healthy, but I was making my body worse. And the biggest challenge with this is that it didn't make sense, because I was being healthy and people were saying, oh, you're so healthy, and I was following the really sorry, throat's getting worse. Seems talking makes it worse, understandably. But I was following all this advice, following all these gurus, doing all the right things, but I was making things worse, and it really was a challenge because it didn't make sense. So that might be you. It might not be, but it may well be, and it can be a tough pill to swallow, and you kind of need to chip away at that. So keep an open mind to this, and I think really, we've been sold this warped idea of what health is, and that if we're not constantly grinding through our workouts and crushing our goals and conquering all of life's challenges, then we must be lazy. But life can be stressful enough, and what I would say is I would encourage you to remember that the health and fitness industry needs you more than you need them. Now, the next thing is to, maybe seems all very complicated, but what I would say is don't overthink or overcomplicate things, but do something. Do some sort of exercise, no matter how simple or small. So if an area is too sore to move, so I'm saying, you should exercise, and you're like, well, exercise hurts. Then I would say move parts of your body that aren't sore. Maybe if your low back is sore, move your wrist, move anything. Genuinely, just move anything. Find things you enjoy, and find things that are meaningful and do them. Find things that you can do with friends. Find things that are mentally and physically stimulating. You don't have to be out of breath. It doesn't have to be intense. Try to create, build, or achieve things with your body. Make it greater than exercise. Walk in the forest, climb some trees, listen to the birds, enjoy the fresh air, watch the squirrels in the trees moving. That's movement of your eyes. It's beneficial as well. Hike a mountain, climb a mountain, get to the peak of a mountain, enjoy the view, look into the distance, exercise your eyes, find a stream, throw some rocks in it, Build a dam. I love building dams. This is really specific to me, but hopefully it resonates with you. Carry some branches, build a fort, build a treehouse, whatever it is. Don't worry about arbitrary numbers of repetitions or sets or distances. Just do something until it's done, or do something until you're done, until you're content, until you're satisfied. And to sort of better understand this, you can ask yourself what your ancestors would have done for, quote, exercise. Would they have been doing bicep curls and ab blasting workouts? And as an example, my grandfather on my mother's side, he lived to 104, and I'm pretty sure he never set foot in a gym. And he was strong, he was healthy his whole life, and it's not because he ate protein bars and did CrossFit, but because moving and using his body was part of his life. And it was the same on the other side of my family. They were very healthy and strong, yet they never thought about hitting the gym 4 times a week and getting enough protein. And I think where they lived, there weren't gyms. Like, the gyms weren't a part of your life. So, and I bring these examples up because chances are that's the case for your family, whether it's grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, whatever it is. They didn't need all these things that we're told that we need, and they seem to do better. And it's not to romanticize things of the past necessarily, because there are obviously benefits to what we have now. But again, it's just keeping that balance. So you may want to reflect on how this modern idea of exercise and fitness has been sort of fabricated and doesn't really seem to be necessary. And again, it's not to say that it can't have value. Like I said, it's always balance. But I'm mostly interested in making it clear that there's nuance to these things, and in the case of chronic pain, we probably need to be doing a lot less, quote, exercise. We need to be doing a lot less of this really intense, meaningless exercise for the sake of punishment. So I would encourage you to move past the narrow idea of exercise and to simply seek to move frequently throughout the day in a variety of ways. Live your life in a way that requires frequent and varied movement. So you simply find things that you can do in your day-to-day life, that maybe you start walking places, you carry your shopping, you don't use a trolley, whatever it is, you take the stairs. You just find simple ways of moving more. It doesn't have to be a gym membership, it doesn't have to be high intensity interval training. They have their place, that's fine. But with regards to pain, I'm giving you permission to do less, but simply find ways to make your life more movement rich. So that's it for this episode. My throat made it through barely. As usual, I've included some resources, and these resources are going to give you ideas on how to get moving and to challenge your idea of what exercise is, because that can be a huge part of it, where we're just kind of entrenched in this idea. So maybe you just need to see what other options are available to you. So be sure to check those out. Going forward, I really encourage you to reflect on your exercise habits and ask yourself if you may be doing too much. I think that's one of the big realizations. Maybe you're doing too much, and maybe you need to realize that. And bigger question is if you may be using intense exercise as a coping strategy for other deeper issues. So with that, I will leave you with that little bit of food for thought. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Physical Education Podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with someone in need. If you found value in the information here, they will too. So please share this in whatever way you can. If you have any questions, you can email me directly at pa@thebackpaincoach.net. I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. If you'd like more information to help you overcome pain, be sure to follow The Back Pain Coach on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, and to join my newsletter. The major turning points in my own recovery have come from changes in perception and through learning more about myself. I believe that we can help others by sharing information that expands their minds. Finally, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher so that others may find this information and you can play a positive role in their healing journey. Thanks again for listening.